Hello, got a question for you today. So, why would you want to remove yourself from your company if you're not planning on selling it? Let me tell you more about what I mean. I gave a copy of the book recently to a colleague of mine, and he was reading through it. And after the first couple chapters, mentioned that, well, this book seems like it would be for somebody selling their company, and we're not planning on selling right now. Like, I understand that, but here's some of the processes that you need to consider when you want a successful business. And I go back into the what ifs. What if something were to happen to you where you were unable to run your business and you were controlling a lot of what was going on? And I think this is where he was getting stuck because when I do talk in the book, I talk a lot about succession and what it means to get a company ready to be sold or to move on. You still have to have the same mindset in place as a business owner as to if something were to happen to me, what's going to keep this company going? Because again, when you look at it, what depends on you or who depends on you? Well, everything from your employees to your customers to your community, they all rely on you to be around. And if you're not around, well, it's kind of hard to keep the business up and going. So the idea behind the book is really not just for small business owners or even medium-sized companies or anyone that's just looking to sell their business. It really is a model for all companies that are looking for ways to remove ownership from a singular person. And that singular person I focus on a lot is the owner of the company. That's why it's called Escape the Owner's Trap. But at the same point, you have key employees that might have been around for 20, 30 years. They're probably starting to think about retirement at this point. And if you're in a situation where that employee retires and that wealth of knowledge that they've developed over time goes away, you've just created a problem for yourself. Because guess what? They're probably going to let you know they're retiring and maybe give you anywhere from a couple weeks to a couple months. And in that time, you then have to figure out what all that person was doing. Well, what happens if you can't do that? What happens if there's critical knowledge that's missed that goes away when the person leaves? Worse yet, what happens if you or, again, a key employee were to be put in a health situation or in the event, the tragic event that your death would occur or their death would occur, where that knowledge is lost instantly? You don't even have the luxury of downloading that information out of their head, if you will, to get it on paper and to get it somewhere where you can manage it and control it and know what is actually going on, be able to share that knowledge with somebody else. The biggest problem I find in organizations is the owner knows a lot of information. There's some key employees that know a lot of information, and there's no backups put in place to make sure that knowledge is transferred to somebody else over time. Now, this happens for a number of reasons. One key reason, especially for some of the older generation ones, is really job protection. Well, if I know everything or if I know key elements about my role and nobody else does, the chances of the boss letting me go are pretty small. That logic is false to a greater degree. Now, there are some owners that will look at that and say, I do count on that person and I am reluctant to let that individual go because of the knowledge they know. But if the performance isn't what it should be or where it needs to be, sometimes that is taken out of the equation. At the same point, I think there's this idea that there's always time to do this later on, and you've probably heard me talk in either other podcasts or on other videos, or maybe even in some of the writing that you see, that there's this false sense of security that we all have that we're always going to have tomorrow. Well, guess what? We're not always in the luxury of having tomorrow show up. So if we haven't done our work, if we haven't documented our information, if we don't have systems in place and we aren't looking to optimize those systems, it's going to affect everything from our sales to our profitability and potentially even to the survival of our business. Like I said, there's people out there that count on you. If you think of it even just in your small group, your family, your husband, your wife, your kids, whoever might be around you that at some degree are dependent on the income that your business generates, that is a serious issue that needs to be dealt with. And it can't be something that you put off because, again, tomorrow may never come. You could be driving home from work tonight and get hit by the proverbial bus, if you will. And we want to make sure that your loved ones are taken care of. We want to make sure your employees are taken care of. I talk to many business owners, and employees, in a lot of ways, they call them like family. They want to make sure that they're getting paid, that their families are taken care of, that there's opportunity for them, because that's what your business provides. And if you're not doing your part to make sure that company is successful in the long term, that's going to lead to some problems down the road. At some point, something's going to happen which is going to lead to problems in your business if you don't have good systems documented and you don't have procedures in place that essentially remove you or key employees from the need to be there all the time. Now, this is really about putting systems in place where we're starting to create that legacy. We're starting to create the chain of leadership. So we're trying to grow people in our organization to eventually backfill positions where somebody could be promoted up, or should they reach that point where they are getting ready to retire, there's a smooth transition that happens in that. And that even has to happen at the top level. And that's where you as owners, whether you're looking to sell your business or not, really need to consider what it is you're doing, what decisions you're making, and why does the buck always stop with you? Who else is capable of making that decision in your organization, or who else should be making that decision in your organization? I think if you look closely, you might be surprised how much you are controlling what happens in your company and how that slows down the process and creates bigger friction and bigger bottlenecks when you are unavailable to answer those questions. If you look at it this way, how many times have you seen workflow completely stop until somebody got an answer from you? Worst case yet, you're on vacation. You're not even in the country, for example. And you get that phone call, that text, that email where there's a problem, there's a fire that needs to be put out, and you need to deal with that when you are not in a position where it's easy for you to do. I have been in that situation. I know many of others that have been in that situation. I know clients that have been in that situation. It is not fun. So you need to find ways to put in place barriers that allow you to take time off, whether it be for a couple days or a couple weeks. Ultimately, we want to move to where now it's a couple months, and eventually to where you could even remotely operate the business if you need to, because you have key people in place that know what needs to be done, know how it needs to be done, know the outputs that are expected, and ultimately also have backups that can step into their roles should they be unable to perform them as well. That's what I want you to think about here. So if you got any questions, feel free to reach out. I encourage you to read the book, Escape the Owner's Trap. It is available on Amazon and all the other booksellers out there, so I encourage you to buy it. That's my shameless plug. If you want to talk more about the book or the concepts, please feel free to reach out to me. Probably the easiest way to go is go to themaaxsystem.com. That is THEMAAXSYSTEM.com. And just leave me a note, pop me an email, and I'll be happy to help you out. Thanks again.